In this video, we will discuss Michel Foucault's essay, The Will to Knowledge. Discursive practices are ways of talking and thinking that involve certain rules. These rules define what things we can talk about, how we should look at them, and the right ways to develop ideas and theories. These rules also lead to choices about what to include and what to leave out. These rules are not exactly the same as what individual books or writings follow. Even though these rules show up in those writings and might become noticeable for the first time there, they go beyond those works and often apply to many of them. However, these rules also don't always match up perfectly with what we usually think of as fields of study or subjects, although sometimes they might overlap temporarily. More often, a way of talking and thinking brings together different subjects or fields of study, or it goes through multiple subjects and combines their areas in a way that might not be very obvious. These ways of talking and thinking are not just about creating words and sentences. They take shape in practical systems, in organizations, in patterns of behavior, in ways of passing on information and spreading ideas, and in teaching methods that establish and maintain them. Finally, these ways of talking and thinking undergo specific changes. These changes are not simply about one person making a new discovery, but they also can't be just described as a complete change in how people collectively think. Changing a way of talking and thinking is connected to a bunch of different changes that might happen outside of it, like changes in how things are made in social relationships or in politics, or within it, like improvements in how we define things, in refining and adjusting ideas, or in collecting more information, or even alongside it, in other ways of talking and thinking. These changes are connected to the original way of talking and thinking, but they have their own independence and specific purposes related to what is causing the change. The ideas about excluding and choosing certain things. These ideas are found in many places, proven by real actions, and can change on their own. These ideas don't come from a single person inventing them one by one. They come from a nameless and changing desire for knowledge, which is connected to various influences. Studying real cases, like looking at mental disorders, medical treatments, or natural processes, helped identify how people talk and think. The overall characteristics of these ways of talking and thinking, as well as the right methods to study them, were categorized as archaeology. Research about the desire for knowledge needs to explain this idea in theory. At this point, we can suggest the directions this research needs to take, like understanding the difference between knowledge and learning, or the difference between wanting to know things and wanting to find the truth, and figuring out where individuals stand in relation to this desire. Right now, there are not many clear tools to analyze the desire for knowledge. People often use simple ideas like curiosity, the need to understand, fear of the unknown, reaction to things that are uncertain. They might also look at general historical trends or philosophical concepts like how rational thinking changes over time. But these ideas from fields like psychology and philosophy might not fit neatly into historical research about the desire for knowledge. We should realize that we have to create new tools to analyze the desire for knowledge as we go along, based on what we learn from specific studies. Looking at the history of philosophy can give us some models of this desire for knowledge, and studying those models might help us understand better. Out of many philosophers like Plato, Spinoza, Schopenhauer, Aristotle, and Nietzsche, Foucault chooses Aristotle and Nietzsche because they represent extreme and opposite forms of this desire for knowledge. The way Aristotle thought about knowledge was mainly based on his works like Metaphysics, Nicomachean Ethics, and De Anima. He looked at how we sense things and found some important ideas. He linked our senses to pleasure. When we sense things, it can be pleasurable. This link between sensing and pleasure does not always depend on how useful the sensation is for our body. The more we know from a sensation, the more intense the pleasure from it. So, the stronger the sensation's impact on our knowledge, the greater the pleasure. Aristotle believed that true pleasure does not come from false sensations. Pleasure is connected to the truthfulness of what we sense. He observed these ideas in our ability to see things. When we see objects far away, it is not always about survival, it is also about gaining knowledge and pleasure. This same relationship appears in the happiness we feel when we think deeply about things. We might name it philosophical contemplation. Aristotle thought that the desire to learn is natural and universal, starting from our basic sensations. On the other hand, Nietzsche had a different view as shown in the gay signs. Nietzsche said, knowledge is like an invention, and behind it are instincts, desires, fears, and the urge to take things for themselves. Knowledge comes from the clash of these forces. Knowledge does not arise from instincts working well together. It comes from their conflicts and uncertain compromises. It is not a fixed ability, it is more like a series of events. Nietzsche saw knowledge as always being dependent on what's advantageous for the dominant instincts. It serves those interests of the instincts. Even though knowledge claims to be about the truth, Nietzsche said it actually creates truth through twisting and changing things. This makes a distinction between what is true and what is not. Interest is placed as more important than the knowledge it controls, treating knowledge as just a tool. This separated knowledge related to pleasure and happiness is tied to inner conflicts, dislikes, and negativity to the extent that it's almost like rejecting itself through even more conflicts and negativity. Its original connection to truth falls apart because in this kind of knowledge, truth only appears as a result, and it is a result of changing the truth and falsehood. This idea of knowledge being heavily influenced by our interests and being formed by our choices goes against traditional metaphysical beliefs. It is a model that was used to study examples from ancient Greek history and their ways of doing things. These examples were all about justice, focusing on how justice was handled from the 7th to the 5th centuries. They looked at how oaths changed from being defiant pledges in disputes where people risked the wrath of gods to assertive oaths from witnesses who were expected to speak the truth based on what they saw. They also observed the search for fairness not just in trading but in social interactions within the city state through the use of money. They also explored the search for laws that would ensure fairness in distributing resources, which helped maintain the order of the city state following the order of the world. They examined rituals performed after killings. Throughout this time, the way justice was distributed led to significant political battles. Eventually, it led to a kind of justice connected to knowledge, where truth was seen as something visible and easily established, following rules similar to those governing the natural order. This discovery of truth was seen as a way to cleanse oneself. This concept of truth became highly important in shaping Western knowledge.